It all began as just another film project. At least, that's what everyone thought. The cameras were ready, the makeup applied, the props in place. But as the days unfolded, it became clear that this was not a typical movie production. Something unseen yet deeply felt began to move among the cast and crew of The Passion of the Christ. It was as though an invisible veil had been lifted, allowing the spiritual realm to seep into every light, every sound, every breath taken on set. From the very beginning, the atmosphere was unlike anything anyone had experienced. The silence between takes wasn't filled with idle chatter. It was filled with awe. Whispers replaced laughter, and even the footsteps of the crew seemed softer, as if everyone instinctively knew they were stepping on holy ground. There was something sacred in the air, something that transcended the script. Jim Caviezel, the actor chosen to portray Jesus, walked onto set thinking he was there to perform. But what he encountered was far more than a role. It was a divine encounter that would shake him to his core. He wasn't acting. Not really. Each moment of pain, each drop of blood, each expression of love and sorrow, he felt them as real, not rehearsed, not performed. Real, as if the heart of Christ had touched his own and his soul was no longer just his. Jim would later admit that the role broke something inside him, only to rebuild him in ways he never imagined. He wasn't just portraying Jesus. He was meeting him scene by scene. But Jim wasn't the only one affected. Members of the crew began noticing strange things. Moment of stillness, where time itself seemed to pause. Cold breezes would suddenly sweep through the set under a scorching sun. Shadows dance in places where no lights were pointed. And during emotionally intense scenes, some felt watched, but not by the cameras. One technician described feeling a warmth on his back, even though no lights were on. A makeup artist reported hearing a soft whisper when no one was around. Others simply felt it in their hearts, a presence, gentle, powerful, and unmistakably divine. It was as though heaven had opened a window, and for a brief moment, allowed its presence to spill into their world. Not for show, not for entertainment, but for a purpose far greater than any of them could comprehend. And yet, amidst the quiet awe and subtle signs, there was love. A deep, overflowing love that filled the hearts of everyone present. Not fear, not anxiety, but peace. That strange, indescribable peace that surpasses all understanding. The kind of peace that makes you fall to your knees and whisper, "I believe." This was not just a film being made. This was a testimony being written in real time. Before we continue, we have something special just for you. In the next video, we'll be sending a personal message to those who comment their name and city down below. If you'd love to hear your name spoken to thousands of people around the world. If you've ever dreamed of that beautiful moment when you're the one everyone sees, even for just a minute, this is your chance. Leave a like, write your name and city in the comments, and let us celebrate you. You matter. Your light deserves to shine. Your voice can echo across nations. Let this be your moment, because what happened next would shake the very soul of everyone who witnessed it. From the outside, it looked like any other film set. Lights, cameras, the murmur of crew members moving equipment, the scent of makeup and fabric mixed with the heat of the sun. But behind the lens, something deeper was happening, something sacred. As the filming progressed, it was no longer just a production. It was becoming a passage through pain, sacrifice, and divine presence. Jim Caviezel, once confident and strong, began to feel an invisible pressure pressing down on him each day. Not just physical exhaustion or emotional toll, but a spiritual weight, a heaviness that settled into his soul every time he put on the tattered robes, every time the crown of thorns was placed on his head. It was as if the pain he was portraying was being written into his own body. In one intense moment, during the scene of Christ's scourging, something unimaginable happened. The whip, carefully crafted by the effects team, slipped its mark and struck Jim for real. The sound of the impact was sickening. The crack echoed to the set like thunder. For a moment, time froze. Jim collapsed, unable to breathe. The pain was unbearable. His back began to bleed. But what followed was even more shocking. He didn't cry out in anger. He didn't stop the scene. He got back up. There were tears in his eyes, but he whispered a prayer, not for relief, but for purpose. Lord, if this pain means something, let it be yours. From that moment, the entire crew was changed. They had witnessed something that went beyond method acting. This wasn't performance. It was communion. Every beat of the drum, every scream in the distance, every drop of fake blood seemed to carry real meaning, real energy, a divine presence, invisible yet unmistakably felt. People who had no particular faith, grips, camera operators, assistants, began to feel a shift in their hearts. Some walked off set to cry alone. Others stayed silent for hours after shooting. Something inside them was stirring, as if the Spirit of God had quietly entered their lives without a word. Jim himself began to pray more often between takes. He asked for strength not just to perform, but to endure, to carry not just a cross made of wood, but the weight of something far more eternal, the responsibility of representing Christ's sacrifice, not as a symbol, but as a living witness. One night, as the cast and crew rested after a particularly grueling day, a small group gathered near the edge of the set. No script, no stage direction, just people sitting in silence. Jim joined them. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The silence was a prayer. The flickering torches cast long shadows, and in that quiet space, someone began to sing, a soft hymn. Then another joined. Then another. Soon, the night was filled with a kind of worship that no one had planned, but everyone needed. It was in that sacred silence that hearts began to break open, and that's when the dream started. Several members of the team reported waking up in the middle of the night with visions. Some saw Christ's face. Others felt words press into their chest as they woke. One assistant director dreamed of a blinding light and heard a voice say, "This is not acting. This is remembrance." The whispers of the Spirit were growing louder. What they were creating was not a film. It was an altar, an offering, a testimony. The deeper they entered into the story, the more real it became. The pain, the sacrifice, the forgiveness. It wasn't just being performed. It was being experienced. Some began to fast. Others asked for confession. A few even returned to faiths they had long forgotten. And those who had never believed began to question everything they thought they knew. Because when the Spirit moves, it leaves no heart untouched. And in the center of it all stood a man portraying Christ, not just with his words, but with his wounds. Jim's body was bruised, his shoulder dislocated from the weight of the cross, his lips chapped from cold winds. He often stood for hours, nailed to the wooden beam, trembling, not just from fatigue, but from something unexplainable, something holy. They said his eyes began to change. They said he wasn't just acting anymore. He was being transformed. The next day, the storm came. Not just wind and rain, but something that would leave the entire set shaken to its foundation. The air was still, too still, as the crew prepared for one of the most emotionally charged scenes of the entire production. The crucifixion. An unexplainable weight fell over the set. People moved slower. Their voices dropped to whispers. The very ground beneath their feet felt heavier, as though something unseen had claimed the space for something sacred. Even the wind seemed to pause, waiting. Jim Caviezel stood atop the wooden beams that formed the cross, suspended against a sky that had grown dark and expectant. The clouds, thick and low, gathered like an audience above them. The reconstructed Golgotha felt less like a set and more like a portal, between worlds, between times, between heaven and earth. Everything had to be perfect. The cameras were ready. The lights were in place. Everyone's breath was held. And then the storm arrived. Not a typical storm. Not just wind and rain. What came was violent, sudden, and deeply unnatural. Without warning, a flash of light split the sky. A bolt of lightning so fierce it lit the entire mount-like day. The thunder that followed didn't roll in from a distance. It exploded directly above them, as if heaven itself had cracked open. A scream erupted from one of the crew members. People dropped to the ground in panic. And then came the silence. Deafening, absolute. All eyes turned toward Jim. He was still on the cross. Frozen, breathless, his body stiff, arms outstretched, face turned toward the heavens. And in that instant, another bolt of lightning struck. It hit him, not near him. Him, A raw bolt of energy surged through his body, and for a fraction of a second, the world seemed to stop spinning. Cameras kept rolling. No one yelled cut. No one could move. The power of the moment was beyond comprehension. Jim didn't fall. He didn't cry. He simply remained, arms wide, nailed across, his face twisted in pain, yes, but also in something else. Something like awe. His hair stood on end. His skin seemed to glow for a moment. The clouds swirled behind him like a divine canvas. It was as if he had stepped through the veil and was standing between earth and eternity. When the crew finally rushed him, expecting him to be unconscious, or worse, they found him trembling, pale, but standing, alive, present, changed. And his words? "I'm okay." But his eyes told a different story. Later, when asked what he felt in that moment, Jim responded with a quiet voice. It didn't feel like death. It felt like a kiss. He didn't mean it metaphorically. He meant it as truth. Something had touched him in that moment. Something beyond human, beyond reason. And others had felt it too. The sound team, reviewing the footage, noticed something strange. During the lightning strike, the microphones picked up a low hum, like a voice. But it wasn't speech. It wasn't static. It was melodic, rhythmic, as if a song, ancient and sorrowful, had passed through the storm and been captured for a single moment. Some dismissed it as coincidence. Others began to pray. But the most unsettling discovery came days later, when one of the assistant editors, reviewing the footage frame by frame, noticed a shape in the sky behind the cross. At first, he assumed it was a bird, or smoke, or just a trick of the light. But the more he looked, the clearer it became. A figure, faint, translucent, tall, dressed in radiant white. Watching, the editor froze. He called in others. They watched it together, played the footage back and forth, over and over. No one could explain it. No one could ignore it. Some wept. Some fled the room. The director of photography, normally a man of logic and detail, whispered under his breath. He was there, and he wasn't alone. Jim, when shown the footage, sat in silence for several minutes. Then he said something that no one expected. This wasn't the first time. The room fell still. He continued. There were other moments. Times when I felt someone standing beside me during scenes. Not crew, not actors. Something else. Watching, protecting, grieving. Jim wasn't sharing a story. He was giving a testimony. The lightning strike had left a mark, not just on his body, but on his soul. And the cross? It wasn't just a prop. It had become something more. During one of the final takes, he said he felt it would grow heavier, as though the weight of every sin ever committed had settled onto his shoulders. His chest tightened. He could barely breathe. And just when he thought he couldn't go on, a warm presence surrounded him. His pain faded. The cold left his bones. And for a moment, he felt peace. Pure, unshakable, undeniable peace. He looked into the camera, still in character, but also completely himself, and whispered the words that would haunt the crew forever. Forgive them, they know not what they do. They had seen the lightning. They had heard the thunder. They had felt the weight of something supernatural pass through the set, like wind through a chapel. But no one was prepared for what came next. In the days that followed the storm, an unusual stillness lingered over the crew. Not one born of fear, but reverence. A hushed sense of awe filled every space. People spoke more softly. Some carried rosaries. Others fasted, prayed, or simply sat in silence between takes, eyes often lifted to the sky. And it was the sky that would soon deliver yet another sign. During the playback of a scene captured just after the lightning strike, something strange was noticed by a young assistant in the editing room. The footage, taken during the crucifixion sequence, was breathtaking. Dark skies, swirling winds, and Jim Caviezel, still trembling from the strike, hanging on the cross. But behind him, deep within the storm clouds, something flickered. At first, it looked like a distortion, a smudge, maybe, but as the frames were played back in slow motion, the image sharpened. What appeared was not a lens flare, not a shadow, not an illusion. It was a face, faint, ethereal, but undeniably human, framed by light, Eyes closed as if in sorrow, it hovered in the clouds for just a moment, then faded. The editing room fell silent. People leaned in, rewound the footage, watched it again. And again, some claimed it was pareidolia, the mind seeing patterns where none exist. But others didn't need convincing. They felt it. They knew. News of the phenomenon spread through the set like wildfire. The footage was shown to Jim Caviezel, who watched it with wide, tear-filled eyes. When the clip ended, he didn't speak for a long time. Then, placing a hand over his heart, he whispered, "He's watching. He's really watching." The crew was shaken, but something deeper stirred in them, a realization, a quiet understanding that what they were doing wasn't just honoring Christ's story. They were entering it, participating in it, living it, and more signs began to appear. During another shoot day, as they filmed the scene where Jesus falls beneath the weight of the cross, a gust of wind blew through the set, suddenly, forcefully lifting fabrics, pushing over equipment, even causing lights to flicker. In the middle of this chaos, a crew member swore he heard a voice whisper, "Carry it with me." He turned. No one was there. Another technician, tasked with managing sound, noticed strange audio disturbances during scenes of deep emotion. Subtle sounds embedded in the recordings, like breath, like weeping, like distant chants. They were never heard live, only captured in playback, as if something was being recorded that didn't belong to this world. Some were terrified, others were moved, but no one remained indifferent. The energy on set had changed permanently. Jim himself seemed altered. He walked slower, spoke more gently, often retreating to pray between takes. He began to speak of visions, not dreams, but flashes, moments when he felt Jesus beside him, walking through the dust, touching his shoulder, whispering encouragement in the storm. He shared one vision in particular that shook everyone who heard it. "I was on the cross, and I felt a hand on my back. I opened my eyes. The sky was dark, the crew was gone. I was alone, but not really. He was there. He didn't speak. He just stood with me, and I knew I wasn't acting anymore. I was remembering." That confession spread through the team like a sacred fire. Even those who came to set as skeptics began to open up. Some asked to be baptized. Others returned to prayer after years of silence. Many cried openly during the most emotional scenes, unable to explain why their hearts felt so broken and so full. And then came the final confirmation. A second image, found in unused footage. This time, not a face in the sky, but a figure, dressed in light, standing behind the cross, visible only for a single frame. It defied logic. It silenced every room. No one could explain it, but no one could ignore it either. If you're still here, it's because your heart is open. You felt something in this story, a pull, a light, a whisper. And if that's true, then I invite you, lovingly, to type one simple word in the comments. Amen. Not because you have to, but because you believe. Because somewhere inside, you feel that this is more than a story. This is a call, a blessing, a spark of heaven reaching your screen. Type amen to declare that you want to keep receiving God's presence in your life. Let the light continue. Let the blessings grow. Let the world know we are not alone. Because what was about to happen next would test the very faith of everyone on set. As the final days of filming drew closer, something had changed profoundly and undeniably. The set was no longer just a space for lights and cameras. It had become sacred ground. Every step, every word spoken, every moment of silence was saturated with a sense of divine presence. It wasn't just the actors who felt it. The entire crew, grips, electricians, makeup artists, costume designers, caterers, each began to carry an invisible weight in their hearts, as though heaven itself was watching and whispering. Jim Caviezel walked differently now. His body bore the marks of the scenes he filmed. Cuts on his back from the accidental lashings, a dislocated shoulder from falling under the real weight of the cross, and tremors in his limbs from hours exposed to wind and cold. But what marked him most wasn't visible. It was in his eyes. They seemed to carry something ancient. Pain, yes, but also peace. Between takes, he would retreat into quiet corners, hands clasped, eyes closed. Sometimes tears streamed down his cheeks. Other times, he just smiled gently, as if listening to something no one else could hear. One afternoon, as the team reviewed raw footage, a makeup artist burst into tears. It wasn't the violence of the crucifixion scene. It wasn't the blood or the agony. It was a silence so deep, so heavy, so full of reverence that it broke something inside her. "I could feel him," she whispered. "Not Jim. Him." Others began sharing similar stories. A lighting technician admitted he hadn't prayed in over 15 years. But on the night of the lightning strike, he felt his knees in his trailer, sobbing. A production assistant confessed she had seen a shadow move across the set, even though no one was there. And when she blinked, she felt peace wash over her like a wave. It wasn't just a movie anymore. It was a movement of the spirit. But one moment, one sacred moment, left everyone undone. It happened during a retake of the crucifixion's final scene. The sky above was thick with clouds, casting a soft gray light over the set. The wind, so often turbulent and unpredictable, had calmed to a gentle breeze. Jim was on the cross, arms stretched, head bowed. The scene was silent. The camera zoomed in slowly. And then it happened. A beam of sunlight broke through the clouds. Just one. A narrow ray of gold that moved across the set like a finger of God. It landed on Jim's face just as he looked up toward the heavens. No one moved. No one spoke. The camera kept rolling, and for a moment, everything was still. Some say the beam made his eyes glow. Others swear they saw a faint outline behind him, wings perhaps, or a figure in robes. But the most powerful moment came just after cut was called. Jim remained on the cross, trembling, not from pain, from something else. "I felt him," he whispered. "I wasn't alone up there. He was with me." People began to cry, not from fear or sadness, but from a deep, overwhelming love, a sense of being seen, known, held. One by one, crew members approached the cross, not for a photo, not for work, but to kneel. They placed their hands on the wood. They whispered prayers. Some asked for forgiveness, others for healing. Others said nothing at all, just wept. In that moment, no one was acting. No one was pretending. They were worshiping. This film had begun as an artistic project, but by now it had become a revival, an awakening, a portal between heaven and earth, wide open, welcoming all who dare to look. And from behind the camera, Mel Gibson stood silently, tears in his eyes. The man who had directed epic battles and grand spectacles now witnessed something greater than cinema. He witnessed transformation, not just in his actors, not just in the script, but in every single soul present. Because when God shows up, everything changes. He doesn't wait for permission. He doesn't need perfect lighting or clear skies. He comes in the storm, in the silence, in the cry of a broken heart. And on that day, he came to a film set and changed lives forever. What happened next would test their faith in ways they never imagined. The final week of filming had arrived, but for those on set, it didn't feel like the end. It felt like something was still building, something sacred that hadn't yet reached its full expression. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, like standing at the edge of revelation. The scenes had become heavier, not just emotionally, but spiritually. It was as if each moment on camera was pulling invisible threads between past and present, between heaven and earth. And the hearts of everyone involved began to open wider. So wide, in fact, that what had started as a film now felt like a collective pilgrimage. The cast and crew were not the same people who had started this journey. They had witnessed things they couldn't explain, felt things they couldn't deny. And now, with the most climactic moments approaching, something in the atmosphere shifted again. It began subtly. One night, while reviewing the footage of the crucifixion from a new angle, a crew member paused the playback. "There," he said quietly, pointing to a figure in the background, not part of the cast, not part of the crew. A faint silhouette standing just beyond the edge of the frame. It was barely visible, but it was there. Others leaned in. Some dismissed it. Others simply stared. No one could fully explain what they were seeing. But in that silence, something stirred. And then, the power went out. No warning, no storm, just darkness. The editing monitors blinked off. The lights went silent. For a moment, the entire room was still, until a soft light flickered from one of the backup batteries. A monitor blinked on, and the image that appeared was a still frame from the crucifixion scene. Jim Caviezel's eyes were lifted toward the sky. Behind him, clouds parted just slightly, revealing a glow, subtle but unmistakable. And then, without anyone touching a single key, the footage resumed. It played the scene, but the audio was gone. In place of dialogue or ambient sound, there was only one thing, a soft melody, wordless, timeless, almost like a lullaby echoing through eternity. When the power returned minutes later, the room remained silent. No one laughed. No one tried to explain it, because deep inside they all knew something had been captured that wasn't written in the script. On set the next day, Jim was unusually quiet. He walked across, touched the base, and closed his eyes. The sun was rising behind him, casting long, golden shadows across the stones. He looked over the crew, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for walking this path with me," he said. This wasn't performance. This was a prayer. Mel Gibson, often reserved, embraced him. But before they could film the final take, something beautiful happened. A line assistant, no older than 22, walked onto the set with tears streaming down her face. She dropped to her knees at the foot of the cross and began to pray out loud, not just for herself, but for her family, for her generation, for the world. And one by one, others joined her. A circle formed. Hands were held. Prayers were whispered. Forgiveness was spoken. Faith was restored. There were no lights, no cameras, just people, broken and hopeful, surrendering under the weight of grace. That day, they filmed one of the final takes. Jim, standing on the cross, looked down with real tears in his eyes, not from pain, but from something deeper, love. And when the director whispered, "Cut," no one moved, because they all knew this film had become a sanctuary, a holy experience etched not on hard drives, but on hearts. If you felt something in your heart while watching the story unfold, if your spirit stirred even slightly, then this is your moment. Leave a like on this video, not just to support it, but to say, "Yes, I felt that too." Hit subscribe to stay connected, because this journey is just beginning. We want you to walk it with us, to feel part of something sacred, something that speaks beyond the screen and into your soul. You're not just a viewer. You're part of this story now. Your presence matters. Your faith shines. And your light can inspire someone else. So go ahead, leave your like, subscribe, and stay with us. Because what happens next is beyond anything they could have imagined. The cameras had stopped. The lights were off. The costumes were packed. The props dismantled. The set that once echoed with cries of pain, whispers of prayer, and mysterious winds now stood still, silent under the open sky. But those who had walked through this journey knew something had been left behind. Not a memory, a presence. The final scene had been filmed the day before, the moment of Christ's death. Jim Caviezel, nailed to the cross under a slate-gray sky, delivered the last line with a voice that cracked, not from acting, but from something far more personal. "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." And as the final words were spoken, the clouds broke open once more, not with rain or thunder this time, but with light. A beam of sun, golden and pure, streamed down and bathed the cross in radiant warmth. The entire set froze. And then, one by one, people began to cry, not in fear, not in sadness, but in awe, deep wordless awe. Mel Gibson stood behind the camera, trembling. The crew said nothing. The silence was the only response worthy of that moment. Later that evening, as the team gathered for a quiet dinner, the atmosphere was unlike any rap party they'd ever known. No loud music, no celebration, just candlelight, soft conversations, and the unmistakable sense that they had witnessed something holy. And then it happened one last time. A member of the post-production team arrived with a hard drive in hand. He had discovered a single frame in one of the final cuts, one that hadn't been planned or scripted. one that no one could explain. It was during the final crucifixion scene. In a single, blurred instant, a figure appeared behind the cross. Not an actor, not a technician, not anyone from the crew. The figure was cloaked in light, tall, majestic, gentle, its face indistinct, its form almost too radiant to define. But what struck everyone was the posture. It stood with arms open, as if embracing the suffering from behind, sharing it. Some said it was a trick of light. Others wept. Jim Caviezel was silent for a long time as he stared at the image. Then he whispered, "I told you he was there." And at that moment, no one doubted anymore. The set had become sacred ground. The film, a testimony. Each take, a prayer. The ripple effects didn't end with the crew. When the movie was finally released to the public, theaters around the world reported something unusual. People stayed in their seats long after the credits rolled. Many wept. Others prayed. Some said they felt heat in their chest or a presence beside them. Stories poured in. One man claimed he walked into the theater as an atheist and walked out in tears, whispering the name of Jesus for the first time in his life. Another said that as she watched the crucifixion scene, she felt as if Christ himself looked through the screen and into her soul. Countless others reported dreams, visions, and personal revelations. This was not just a film. It was a spiritual awakening, a divine appointment disguised as cinema. And for those who were part of its creation, their lives would never be the same. Neither would yours. If you followed this story until now, there's a reason. It's no coincidence. You've been called to witness this message, to feel it, to carry it forward. So now, we ask you with love and reverence. If you believe that Jesus is still alive, still speaking, still reaching hearts today, type in the comments, "Jesus is the King." Let your faith be known. Let your voice shine like light through the clouds. And if this video moved you, leave a like and subscribe. Not just for us, but for the next person who needs this story as much as you did. We're building a community of faith, of light, of people just like you who want more than entertainment. They want truth. And this truth, it doesn't end here. A new video is waiting for you right now. A story so powerful, so unexpected, it could shift the way you see the world forever. Click on the video that's appearing on your screen now, because it's not just another story. It's the next step on your journey. May the light of faith guide you always. May your heart remain open. And may your life be forever changed by the one who still moves through storms, silence, and cinema.